It begins like any other morning at the Port of Tema. The waves roll in quietly, cranes swing slowly across the skyline, and the smell of diesel mixes with the salty air. Dockworkers call to one another as cargo ships hum in the distance. To an outsider, it all seems ordinary, just another day in Ghana's busiest harbor. But hidden beneath this routine is a quiet revolution that could reshape the future of Africa. For decades, Burkina Faso has been trapped by geography, a landlocked country depending on others for every bag of rice, every drop of fuel, every box of medicine. Generations have lived under the weight of dependency. But today, a new door has opened. Ghana, long considered one of West Africa's most stable democracies, has decided to become that doorway to the sea. Tema is no longer just a port for Ghana. It is now the lifeline for the Sahel. At the heart of this transformation stand two men with very different pasts, but one shared vision. John Mahama, the newly re-elected president of Ghana, a leader once praised by the West for his calm diplomacy, and Ibrahim Traoré, the young and defiant military leader of Burkina Faso, determined to pull his nation out of foreign control. Together, they have done something no one expected. They have formed a partnership that challenges the old order and dares to dream of a self-reliant Africa. The alliance between Mahama and Traoré is more than politics. It is a statement. It says that Africa no longer wants to ask for help, but to stand and build for itself. It says that ports can become symbols of power, and railways can carry not just goods but independence. If you have ever wondered what it looks like when history changes quietly, without gunfire or headlines, you are watching it unfold in Ghana right now. Tema is the stage, and the world is the audience. But every revolution, even a silent one, has its price. And as Ghana opens its ports and its heart to its northern neighbor, the question remains: will this new friendship bring freedom, or will it awaken the fears of those who have long claimed to guard Africa's future? Stay with us, because the truth behind this alliance is far deeper than anyone imagines. The Port of Tema has always been a place of movement. Ships from all corners of the Atlantic arrive here, their hulls heavy with containers marked from Europe, Asia, and the Americas. For years, Ghana handled its trade efficiently, rarely making headlines. But in the last few years, something unexpected happened. Among the long lines of ships docking at Tema, one country began to stand out: Burkina Faso. Before 2022, very few people paid attention to how landlocked nations like Burkina Faso managed their imports. It was a quiet struggle, often buried beneath stories of drought, poverty, or conflict. Yet by 2025, Burkina Faso had more than doubled the amount of goods it sends through Tema. Over 1 million tons of freight each year now travel this route, carried on trucks that crawl northward through the plains and forests, heading toward the capital city of Ouagadougou. For Ghana, this was more than trade. It was strategy. The government invested more than $1 billion to modernize the port, build new terminals, and expand the railway network that will one day link Tema directly to Burkina Faso's capital. The first 97 kilometers of track are already complete. Each meter of rail represents more than steel and gravel. It is a symbol of hope, of connection, of Africa slowly weaving itself together. At the docks, the change is visible. New cranes rise against the skyline. Warehouses buzz with trucks being loaded day and night. Workers speak of better wages, of job security, of purpose. For the first time, Ghana is earning steady revenue from transit trade, an estimated $34 million a year, not counting the ripple effect on transport and local services. But for Burkina Faso, Tema means something deeper. With no coastline of its own, the nation's survival depends entirely on foreign ports. Fuel, food, construction materials, and medical supplies all must pass through another country's border. When the flow stops, the country stops. A merchant in Ouagadougou recently told a journalist, "If Tema closes for even 1 week, we lose everything. Prices rise, hospitals run out of medicine, and families go hungry." For him and thousands of others, Tema is not a place on a map. It is a lifeline. And yet this lifeline is fragile. Trucks leaving the port face long queues at customs checkpoints. Drivers report being stopped more than a dozen times on the road north, each time losing hours and paying extra fees. Importers complain of hidden taxes, slow clearance procedures, and, in some cases, the sudden seizure of their cargo. For small traders, such delays can mean the difference between staying in business and closing forever. In early 2025, these frustrations reached a breaking point. Burkinabe business owners began voicing their anger through local media, describing Tema as both a gateway and a gamble. And the Ghana Shippers Authority and the Ghana Ports and Harbors Authority took notice. Negotiations began between the two countries, and soon the first reforms followed. Ghana agreed to remove value-added tax on goods merely passing through its ports, and to accelerate plans for a digital customs system to cut down on corruption and delay. It was a start, but problems remained. Infrastructure takes time, and bureaucracy resists change. For every success story, another importer waits helplessly for papers to be stamped. At the same time, powerful new interests are emerging. The more dependent Burkina Faso becomes on Tema, the greater Ghana's influence in the region grows. When John Mahama returned to the presidency, he saw the opportunity not just as economic, but historic. Ghana could become the bridge between two Africas, one still tied to Western systems, and one determined to chart its own course. His message was clear: African solutions for African problems. In Accra, under bright lights and careful smiles, Mahama met with Burkina Faso's young leader, Ibrahim Traoré. Cameras flashed as they shook hands, their agreement signed to deepen cooperation in energy, security, and trade. For the media, it was just another diplomatic moment. For the people of the Sahel, it was something more. It was a promise that the age of waiting for others to rescue them might finally be ending. As ships unload their cargo in Tema and trains prepare for the long journey north, an invisible current is shifting beneath the surface. Ghana, once the quiet success story of Western diplomacy, is redefining what independence looks like in the 21st century. But history rarely moves without resistance. As Ghana opens its gates wider to the Sahel, whispers are already spreading in Washington and Paris. Is this partnership an act of unity, or the beginning of a rebellion against old powers? The answer may decide not only the fate of Ghana and Burkina Faso, but the balance of influence across the entire African continent. It began quietly, with trade and infrastructure. But soon, the partnership between Ghana and Burkina Faso grew into something far larger. By early 2025, what started as a simple economic cooperation had become a political statement, and that is when the world began to pay attention. The turning point came when President John Mahama officially welcomed Ibrahim Traoré to Accra for a bilateral summit. The images spread quickly across news outlets. Mahama, the experienced statesman, standing beside the young and fiery Traoré. They signed agreements on energy, security, and logistics. It was more than paperwork. It was symbolism. Ghana, a nation long viewed as the model of Western partnership, had opened its doors to a leader who had expelled French troops and defied international institutions. For many in Ghana, the sight was inspiring. Crowds gathered outside the conference center, waving flags of both nations. Some shouted that Africa was finally choosing its own path. A retired dock worker told a local station, "When I see our president standing with Traoré, I feel proud. It means we can stand together as Africans, not as followers." But not everyone shared that optimism. In Ghana's parliament, opposition members questioned Mahama's motives. Was this a diplomatic partnership or a political gamble? Business leaders worried about the potential backlash from Western investors. NGOs feared sanctions or reduced aid from European partners. Ghana had built its reputation on stability and moderation. Now it was being painted, fairly or not, as part of an anti-Western movement. Across the border, reactions were mixed too. In Ouagadougou, citizens cheered the images of Traoré shaking Mahama's hand. They saw hope, cooperation, and respect. Yet many traders remained skeptical. "A photo cannot clear customs," one importer said bitterly. "We need results, not speeches." Their skepticism was not without reason. Bureaucratic delays still plagued the port. Promises of digital reform were slow to materialize. Despite the criticism, both leaders pressed forward. In March 2025, Burkina Faso's national oil company purchased a major fuel storage facility inside Tema. The deal, valued at $70 million, gave the landlocked country direct control over its energy imports for the first time. For the people of Burkina Faso, this was more than a business transaction. It was sovereignty in motion. Meanwhile, Mahama continued his diplomatic offensive. He sent delegates to meetings of the Alliance of Sahel States, the new confederation of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. He attended regional forums, speaking about African solutions for African challenges. His words echoed across radio stations from Accra to Bamako. For older Ghanaians who remembered the era of Kwame Nkrumah, it felt like history returning, a new chapter of Pan-African solidarity being written in real time. But in Washington and Paris, the tone was very different. Analysts warned that Ghana was treading dangerous ground, a leaked U.S. policy memo described the Ghana-AES cooperation as the emergence of a parallel economic system. French media accused Mahama of legitimizing military regimes. The headlines spoke of risk, defiance, and the possible isolation of Ghana from Western aid frameworks. Back in Tema, the cranes kept moving, ships kept docking, and life went on. Yet underneath the noise of commerce, a quiet tension grew. Each shipment leaving Tema for Burkina Faso was now a political act. Each train car carrying fuel northward represented not just trade, but a transfer of power away from traditional Western channels. For Ghana's ordinary citizens, this new balance felt uncertain. Taxi drivers debated politics in the heat of the afternoon. Church groups prayed for peace and wisdom. Older generations who had lived through the Cold War sensed that history was repeating itself. Only this time, the battle lines were not drawn by ideology, but by economics. In rural Burkina Faso, villagers followed the developments on old radios powered by car batteries. They did not speak of geopolitics or alliances. They spoke of food, fuel, and medicine. A farmer from Ouagadougou said quietly, "If this friendship with Ghana can bring us a full market, then let the world be angry. We only want to live." His words carried the essence of what this alliance meant to the people most affected. By mid-2025, the Ghana-Burkina partnership had become both symbol and target. Supporters called it the beginning of a new African century. Critics called it a dangerous game. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Still, the question lingers. Every shipment that leaves Tema now tests Ghana's balance between friendship and independence. Every handshake between Mahama and Traoré challenges decades of Western dominance. But what happens when that balance tilts too far? When the weight of new alliances collides with the expectations of old ones? That is when the calm waters of Tema may no longer stay still. The alliance between Ghana and Burkina Faso began as a story of trade, but its echoes now reach far beyond the docks of Tema. What once seemed like an agreement between two governments has become a movement that touches the lives of millions. Across markets, farms, and villages, the effects are being felt in both nations. In southern Ghana, where the air smells of sea salt and diesel, jobs are appearing in ways few expected. New warehouses line the highways near the port. Truck companies hire more drivers. Small food stalls near the terminals stay open late into the night, serving workers who now labor in shifts. A middle-aged porter named Daniel said, "For the first time in years, I can feed my family without borrowing money." To him, the alliance is not about politics. It is about dignity. But further north, the road to Burkina Faso tells another story. The trucks that leave Tema often travel for days, crossing rough terrain and endless checkpoints. For drivers, the journey is hard and uncertain. Some describe being stopped more than 10 times, paying small bribes to continue. Others speak of exhaustion and fear. A driver named Issouf said in an interview, "We bring life to our country, but sometimes it feels like we are alone on the road." His words reflect the quiet burden of those who keep this new trade alive. In Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, change is visible in the markets. Goods that once arrived through Côte d'Ivoire now come through Ghana. Prices of imported fuel have stabilized slightly, and shortages are less frequent. Yet new dependence brings new worries. Many traders ask the same question. What if Ghana changes its mind? What if politics shifts again? Their livelihood now rests on a corridor that crosses hundreds of miles and 2 governments. At the political level, the alliance is redrawing maps in boardrooms and ministries. For Ghana, being the main gateway for the Sahel gives it leverage, but also exposure. Western investors are watching carefully. Some international banks are delaying loans, citing geopolitical uncertainty. At the same time, African development groups are showing renewed interest, seeing Ghana as the link that could unite regional economies from the Gulf of Guinea to the Sahara. Inside Burkina Faso, the government proudly calls Tema its gateway to independence. The purchase of the fuel storage terminal has been hailed as a victory of self-determination. For ordinary citizens, however, progress feels uneven. In rural areas, insecurity from extremist groups still disrupts transport. Farmers cannot always get their crops to market. For them, the alliance remains a distant promise, a symbol of hope still waiting to become reality. Religious and community leaders across both countries have stepped in to to keep the peace. In churches and mosques, pastors and imams preach patience, cooperation, and unity. They remind their followers that true independence cannot exist without justice and compassion. Their voices carry a moral weight that political speeches often lack. For Ghana's older generation, these words recall the spirit of Kwame Nkrumah and the dream of African unity born in the 1960s. Yet beneath the hope lies unease. Some Ghanaian citizens worry that closer ties with the Sahel might drag their country into the region's conflicts. Reports of border attacks and the spread of insurgent violence fuel that anxiety. Others fear that by embracing Burkina Faso and its partners, Ghana could invite diplomatic tension with traditional Western allies. John Mahama remains steady in his message. "We will trade with all who respect our sovereignty," he told Parliament in April 2025. His calm tone contrasts with the heated debates that follow. His critics call him reckless, but his supporters call him brave. Each sees a different Ghana emerging. One looks toward the west for guidance. The other looks inward and northward for solidarity. In the midst of these competing visions, one truth stands out. The destiny of Ghana and Burkina Faso is now linked more closely than ever. Their cooperation carries both promise and risk. Each train that moves north brings not only goods, but also questions about identity and trust. As the sun sets over Tema and trucks prepare for another long journey, a quiet realization spreads. The story of this alliance is no longer about economics. It is about people, values, and the future of a continent searching for balance between survival and sovereignty. But even as hope rises, powerful forces are beginning to take notice far beyond Africa. In the halls of Washington and the offices of Paris, this partnership is being studied, debated, and perhaps feared. Could Ghana's new path challenge the global order that has ruled Africa for generations? Far from Africa's shores, in offices lit by fluorescent light, policymakers are studying Ghana's new direction with uneasy curiosity. Reports circulate through Washington's think tanks describing a shift that could reshape the entire balance of power in West Africa. For decades, the United States and its allies relied on predictable trade corridors, aid programs, and security frameworks. Now, that certainty is fading. A recent analysis from the U.S. Africa Command calls Ghana's growing partnership with Burkina Faso a strategic ambiguity. It praises Ghana's stability, but warns that its outreach to the Sahel could create a new regional system outside Western oversight. In Paris, the reaction is sharper. French newspapers question whether Ghana is quietly legitimizing regimes that expelled their former colonial partner. Editorials ask if France is losing its final foothold in the Sahel. Yet inside Ghana, the government repeats the same message. Trade is not betrayal. Helping neighbors survive is not defiance. Officials insist that Tema's open gates are an act of responsibility, not rebellion. To many Africans, this sounds like maturity rather than danger. They see a continent tired of being managed and ready to take responsibility for its own destiny. In the United States, public opinion is divided. Some diplomats argue that cooperation with nations like Ghana could actually serve American interests by creating stability from within. Others see the risk of influence from new partners such as Russia and Turkey, who are quietly expanding their presence across the region. For them, every shipment from Tema to Ouagadougou is a test of loyalty. Meanwhile, Ordinary Americans who still remember the days of Cold War alliances might recognize a familiar pattern. Once again, nations at the edge of global attention are deciding who they will stand with. This time, however, the contest is not about ideology, but independence. Africa is redrawing its own map, and Ghana has placed itself at the center. Whether this leads to partnership or confrontation depends on how the world chooses to respond. But a larger question now hangs in the air. If Africa begins to build its own system of trust, trade, and defense, can the old powers accept a world where they no longer set the terms? That question will not be answered in conference rooms. It will be answered on the rails of Tema, in the markets of Ouagadougou, and in the hearts of the people who believe their time has finally come. The cranes of Tema still move each morning, lifting containers that carry more than goods. They carry a nation's hopes and a continent's courage. Every sound of metal striking metal is a reminder that progress can be built by ordinary people doing their work with quiet strength. Yet behind that rhythm lies a question that will decide the future of West Africa. Can this fragile alliance hold when pressure rises from every side? Ghana has chosen to open its ports and its heart to its neighbors. Burkina Faso has chosen to trust that friendship, but both choices come with risks. One act of violence along the border, one political misunderstanding, one shift in global markets could test this new foundation. History has shown that building independence is harder than declaring it. The real challenge begins when the first crisis arrives, and the world waits to see who will stand firm. For now, the signs are mixed. Tema's docks are busier than ever, but the air carries tension. Western partners are cautious, African leaders are watching closely, and somewhere between those forces, the people continue to hope that this new chapter will not be written in conflict, but in cooperation. If you have followed this story and felt a stir in your heart, let it remind you that power is not only found in armies or speeches, it is also found in the determination of nations that refuse to stay silent. Ghana's choice to serve as a bridge rather than a barrier is more than politics. It is an act of faith that unity can still rise from division. So tonight, as the lights of Tema reflect on the calm Atlantic, think about what this moment means. Think about the people whose lives depend on a single train, a single ship, a single decision made in good faith. If you believe that justice, dignity, and self-reliance are worth defending, speak about it. Share this story in your own way, because the world is watching Africa, and Africa, for the first time in generations, is watching itself. May God bless Ghana, bless Burkina Faso, and bless every hand that builds peace through work, courage, and truth.